So we've just found out that the YouTube personality named Count Dankula has been convicted of being extremely offensive. So I'm sure you know what it's about, but if you don't know what it's about, basically it's a joke to piss off his girlfriend. He trained her pug to raise its right paw every time he said Sig Heil. So basically he trained his girlfriend's pug to act like a Nazi and filmed it, and the hilarity was that you've got this tiny ugly little dog, responding like a Nazi. Pretty funny. Anyway, somebody complained or found out about it, and he has just been convicted. We don't know what the sentence is yet, but I wanted to offer a couple of thoughts about this and for the future. But to put this in context too, we've also had Lauren Southern banned from the UK. So there's permanently something like 3,000 or 4,000 Muslim terrorists on watch by the British authorities, but they were happy to outright ban Lauren Southern. I think the reason for this is actually quite obvious. If you look at the recent documentary she's just done about white South Africans called Homeland, that enabled a lot of conversation about the white South Africans, to the point where in Australia we are having marches in support of bringing them in as refugees, and some of our politicians are also speaking up about plans to fast track their refugee status to be resettled here. So she's obviously had quite a very real impact in compiling her Homelands documentary. I'm happy to say I also donated a bit of money for her to get this done, because I think that's a very important thing, and some absolutely horrific things have been happening. But back to the UK, if you consider that she has started making this documentary and that it has very real effects in the world, to the point where average people are marching and politicians are speaking up about it, I think it's quite obvious to see that she was likely banned so she could not take on a similar project or document in a similar fashion many of the things that are going on in Britain. And also Brittany Pettibone and her boyfriend Martin Sellner also rejected from the UK. And so big picture, what does this mean? Well, there have been many times over the last few years, the Nice attack in France, Muslims shooting up the Bataclan Theatre, and just absolute horrible torture on people. The trucks of peace, etc., etc. The Ariana Grande concert, 20 young British girls. Once again, terrorism aimed at the primary resource of reproduction for the population of native European people, which is its young women. Not to reduce them to that, obviously, but I'm just talking about from a strategic crippling of another population perspective. That's why men have always fought wars, because women are the bottleneck of population replenishment from a biological perspective only. However, there've been many times over the years where I thought surely this would get the average person enraged enough to demand change and to start worrying. But it seems there is such a concerted effort to keep these things out of mainstream news that most people don't hear about it, and instead they're just simply fed over and over and over again this comfortable little bubble of delusion surrounding the idea of multiculturalism, and basically ramming disparate populations who have no incentive to cooperate whatsoever together under the same space, and crossing your fingers and hoping for the best. I would have to say I honestly don't know if this is a coordinated idea by some shadowy group. I do not have any theories as to what the purpose or outcome is supposed to be, because I can't see any outcome from this that doesn't involve civil unrest and warfare between groups. And I'm not sure who benefits from that. I mean, the only thing I can possibly comprehend is the idea that maybe somebody thinks we need a population cull. But then again, as has been said before, I am also wary to attribute to a conspiracy or to evil intention, that which can also be attributed to stupidity. And I think that for so long, so many people have been living under this delusion of peaceful multiculturalism that it could also simply just be that people are not willing to let go of this delusion just yet. But to borrow another phrase from another prominent YouTuber, the crazy train has no brakes. I mean, this Count Dankula thing is basically, well, there are different groups, different political, ethical, religious, cultural, and ethnic groups living together. And so you do one thing, you can't joke about the out group because the out group is your neighbor. And so it becomes this sort of wrapped in cotton wool, paralyzing, everywhere you turn somebody's offended. And as usual, the heavy hand of the state is always more than happy to insert itself into all these situations, to crush any dissent, and to do everything possible to try and prevent any offense or discomfort of all these groups whatsoever, so as to try and maintain this ever more delicate balance that we call multiculturalism. But yeah, that's probably my advice and my thinking at the moment is the crazy train has no brakes. And so if that's true, where will this end up? Well, the problem is it will probably end up like the vast majority of human history, which is that groups have conflict, because when you get outside people's religious, cultural and ethnic tribes, they lose the incentive or will to cooperate and instead turn to conquest or parasitism. Now, many of these groups, through welfare states and affirmative action and things like that, have already had their fair share of parasitism, but because that's not going to stop, the next step, I think, will be conquest in some form or another. And I really think that, white people have had so much agency and effect in the world. I think the SJWs are right that we have had so much agency in the world. I think it is absolutely foolish to think that when the consequences, the negative consequences of all these things start to hit the average person, that they will not very quickly change their behavior and their opinions based on those changing incentives, and support fighting back against a lot of these things. So it's impossible to tell exactly how this will shake out, but I think I have enough evidence from watching world events over the last 5 or 6 years to confidently say that I don't believe that the crazy train has any brakes. I think this is going to keep going. People are going to keep suffering. People are going to keep being persecuted. Their wealth is going to be stolen. Their commons, their culture are all going to keep being parasitized and diluted until they realize that nobody's coming to save them and they need to do something about it. This is absolutely scary and infuriating, but I think that after the last 50, 60 years of incredible wealth and prosperity in the West, I don't think it's unreasonable to think that we could easily be looking at a new time of extreme conflict. And also, to put it very bluntly, we could also possibly be looking in the near future at a pretty extreme cull of dumb people, because hopefully smart people and aware people will be ahead of the curve. And I think that we need to plan for that. But I think that by the time your average citizen realizes something's wrong, that's when there will be movements to conscript them into militias or whatever needs to happen. And we'll start seeing the fight for your country rhetoric again. I think now is the time to start knowing who your friends are. And if you're the sort of person who's tempted to speak out, I can't say whether it's worth it or not. I mean, I've spoken out in my life, and one thing that dawned on me recently is I used to think it was such a shame because, talking about controversial topics, I could always point to the evidence, yet I always copped quite unfair backlash. But it dawned on me recently that the fact that I am right is why you get the backlash. There's not generally an interest in what's true or moral. There is simply, well, this guy is making a coherent case against my worldview or my parasitism, therefore that needs to stop. And the fact that you are correct is why they attack you. So with that in mind, I don't know to what degree it's worth speaking out. I think either you can do the Tommy Robinson thing and hope to get enough followers that you are funded and you go head to head with the authorities and you put your face on things. I mean, I think Tommy's an absolute fucking hero. What an incredible man, what an incredible job he's doing. But another strategy might be to plan on how to ride out what might possibly happen, to find who your friends are, and to think about emerging from the other side. But I think one thing is clear, is we are entering an age where foreign populations who have no incentive to cooperate with you whatsoever, who have no empathy for your culture or history or even your well-being whatsoever, who are more than happy to parasitize your wealth, parasitize the wealth and civilization that your ancestors fought and died to give you. And I do not believe that these alien populations would think twice in violently conquering us. It seems almost fantastical to say it, but I'm still in disbelief about a lot of the things that have been happening, but I really do think that we're going to see some pretty heavy shit go down in the next 10 or 20 years. I really hope that that's not the case, and obviously I am still doing everything I can in my personal life to keep it rich and fulfilling as much as possible, pursuing all my dreams regardless. But I do think that it's time for us to think about what could possibly happen, know who our friends are, and in the back of our mind start planning for the future as well. Who knows, there might be a big cull of people, and the people that are left could possibly be the ones who were just left because they could see it coming, and maybe there's a utopia on the other side of this. I absolutely don't know, but it absolutely pains me to say that we are at an age now where foreign people can rape and murder your children, and your own countrymen, your own malcontents and parasites within our populations will shame you for being upset or criticizing the delusion of multiculturalism that enabled children, the rape and murder and death of children. It's a scary world out there, and I think that many people are in line pretty soon to have their delusions shattered open. And when that happens, it's not the thoughtful people like us who are going to go mental. It's the people who hold on to this delusional bubble till the last minute and then do something drastic, because if they had the ability to think and restrain their own emotions, then they wouldn't have been in that delusional bubble in the first place. But when that gets torn away from them, there will be an extreme backlash. And I really think if you can even understand these issues now, the only advice I can give is realize that it's probably not going to stop. Realize that it's probably going to get worse. Realize that a lot of these things are coming from the top down. Like, I don't know who or why exactly, but these things are all coming from the establishment, coming from the elites. They're coming from the courts. They're coming from people who own the media. It's coming from the top down, which means that it's not going to stop on any rational basis. And so, like I said, live your life, but also know who your friends are and plan for the worst. Hope for the best, but plan for the worst. I think that's really what we need to be doing.